One way you can apply filters inside Photoshop non-destructively is by using smart filters. So in this video, I'm going to show you what smart filters are and how to use them. So let's get started. Alright, welcome back guys. I hope you are doing great as usual. So if you recall from our previous videos, we talked about smart objects and we said that smart objects help to protect your layers. So if you convert a layer into a smart object, no matter how you scale that layer up and down, the layer will not become pixelated. Smart filters almost work the same way, but just that they apply to filters. Okay guys? So here we have an image on the screen. So let's say I intend to blur this image, so I can go to filter, go to blur, and then add maybe Gaussian blur. Now a value of 12 pixels looks good, so I'm going to click OK. Now let's add another filter to it, so I go to filter, and this time I go to noise, and then choose add noise. Now if you look here on the layers panel, you can see that we are working on the original background, and this is already destructive. Now the next problem is that if I need to adjust the blur of this image, the blur we added a moment ago, we can't be able to do that because everything has already been burnt into this image which is here in the background. And as you saw, we added two filters. We added the Gaussian blur and then the noise. So if you need to modify maybe the Gaussian blur, the only thing you have to do at this stage is to go back by pressing Ctrl Z or Command Z. And let's assume that maybe you have done 500 of these steps. It will really become cumbersome for you to press Ctrl Z 500 times to go back. So this is where smart filters come into play. So I'm going to revert the image by going to File and then choosing Revert. Now the first thing we have to do is to make sure this layer is converted as a smart filter layer. So if we go here under Filter, you will see Convert for Smart Filters. What Photoshop is basically saying is that you are going to convert this layer here at the background into a smart object layer. And to confirm that, if I were to click here, you see it says to enable re-editable smart filters, the selected layer will be converted into a smart object. So you can click OK and choose don't show again, but since I do instructional videos, I have to leave this turned on. So I'll just say OK. And of course, another way you can still convert a layer into a smart object, let's press Ctrl Z to go back, is by coming here on the layer, you right click on it and then choose Convert to Smart Object. Now let us go back to Filter, go to Blur and then choose Gaussian Blur. Let's increase the blur even further, let's say 20 and say OK. And again, let us add the noise filter. So I'll go to Filter, Noise, and then choose Add Noise. Now, the first thing you will notice under the Layers panel is that we have something called Smart Filters. That's basically a filter that has been applied on a smart object layer. Now, I just added a noise filter here to show you how you can be able to remove any filter. You can just click on it and drag it to the trash icon to delete it. And of course, as you can see, the blur is too much. If we need to adjust the blur, we can just go here under the Layers panel, we click on Gaussian Blur, double click on it. Now by double clicking, that will bring up the Gaussian Blur dialog box, and I can click on this slider to drag it down to maybe just 1.8 pixels and say OK. As you can see, we didn't have to press Ctrl Z many times to go back because we applied that filter as a smart filter. Again, let us double click on the Gaussian Blur and take the radius up. Now if you look closely beside here, we have these horizontal lines with these arrows beside them. If you double click on those lines, you are going to bring up the blending mode and opacity for this particular smart filter. So for instance, here we can change the blending mode to something like maybe overlay. And the downside to this blending mode with regards to the normal one we have inside Photoshop is that if you click and hover over them, you do not see the preview on the screen. We can also adjust the opacity of the smart filter by dragging this slider down, as you can see, or taking it up to 100%. I think I like the effect on the screen, so I'm just going to click OK. These two buttons here are very helpful. If you double click on the Gaussian Blur or the filter name, you will have the possibility to modify the parameters of that particular filter. But if you double click on these double arrows here, you will be able to adjust the opacity and the blending mode of that particular filter. In Photoshop, not all filters support this blending mode option. For example, if I were to go to Filter, go to Blur Gallery, and choose maybe Tilt Shift. Let's try to apply that filter by clicking somewhere on the canvas, just like so. And on the options bar, let's just say OK. As you can see, the Blur Gallery filter gets added above the Gaussian Blur. So if we were to add any filter right now, it will get added on top of the Blur Gallery. And as you can see beside it, we don't have this horizontal line. That means you can't be able to control the opacity and the blending mode for Blur Gallery filter. So again, let's drag that to the trash bin to delete it. Now the real reason why I imported this image is so that we can add the illumination to this light bulb. as you can see, it is not too bright. So with this layer selected, I am going to go to filter, go to render, and then choose lens flare. Under the lens flare dialog box, I'm going to make sure I choose the 35mm lens, and as you can see, you can just click anywhere on the dialog window to see how the effect is going to look like. So since I need to place that particular lens flare on this bulb, I'm just going to try to locate the bulb here on this preview window, just like so. Now down here we have the brightness slider, which I can drag up and down to either increase or reduce the brightness of that particular lens flare. So let's leave it at this stage and say OK. And as you can see, everything looks too bright. But because we applied the lens flare on a smart object layer, it gets added as a smart filter. So for us to be able to reduce the lens flare, we can just double click on the word lens flare, or we can even double click on these arrows to increase the opacity and the blending mode. So I can take the opacity to maybe 77%, say OK, and then this time I double click on lens flare itself and take the brightness slider down somewhere just like so and say OK. Now to be able to see the effect, we can be able to toggle the eye icon beside the filters, such as the one with the lens flare. As you can see, this is the before and this is the after with the lens flare added. It makes a whole lot of difference. Now last thing before I wrap up is that if you look closely beside the layer here, you can see this tiny arrow. What this means is that if you have many filters applied to this particular layer and you need to see other layers, you can just click on this arrow once and that is going to collapse it, so you have enough room for other layers. And if you ever need to modify any parameter or any filter, you can just click again on this arrow to expand it just like so. So that was it for this video, guys. I hope you have now understood how to use smart filters inside Photoshop. Just like their counterparts, smart objects, smart filters help you to also work non-destructively. They are so flexible enough as they can be modified anytime you choose along the designing phase of your project. So thank you for watching the video, and if you found it very helpful, kindly support the channel by subscribing and hitting the like button. I'm going to see you in the next one tomorrow. Bye bye.